denounced by the U.S. Catholic League for writing songs that were too awesome. But she ascertains that she was just doing God's work. Visit her at jessicadelfino.com or follow her at twitter.com/JessicaDelfino for daily demented bite-sized snippets. Please welcome Jessica Delfino.
Warm greetings. Alien-esque there for a minute. So I'm gonna play you guys a little song just to break the ice, and I'm gonna read you a story I wrote. And this is a song that I wrote about my boyfriend and I who broke up while I went on a tour to Scotland, and he came with me, and then we broke up in Scotland, which I don't recommend doing. It's a bad scene. Well, my boyfriend and I split apart in Scotland when we were over there to do a show as a folk rock band. Thank you, I wrote that right myself. And nothing to do with the pain that I went through except for booze. Lots of it. And pot. Not just any pot though, like the best pot. You know? Like the kind that killed Bruce Lee. Like the best. I don't even know what kind of strain it is. Killer pot. Killer shit. And a stranger's call. Only a stranger's call can take the pain away. Only a stranger's call can take the pain away. Strangers, people with cocks, you know what I'm talking about. Ladies, thank you. Super titillating. It's kind of more like steamy and like, you know, scintillating or something like that. We'll see what happens. It's kind of a tearjerker, and by tearjerker I mean a story that you can cry into your hand and masturbate with. Wow. All right, it goes like this. Science class was always so tedious that even when something exciting would happen, I was usually face down on my desk, aware of the event only after I heard the oohs and ahs of my peers. One day I happened to be paying attention, so I noticed when a tall, fit man strode into the room to speak with my teacher. They chatted briefly in muted tones. He was close enough for me to catch a glimpse of his green eyes and a smile that radiated charm and personality. At the time, I didn't find him too extremely captivating, more of a delightful distraction from a boring class. I was 16 then. It was springtime in Damerscott, Maine, and the season hesitated much before allowing summer to gingerly approach. I got my first job in June at a restaurant in Pemaquid that my father sold seafood to, which kept me down by the coast most of the time. This is a really bad print, so I'm not like a dyslexic or anything. I actually can read, but it's hard for me to see the words. Let's see. I had totally forgotten about the tall, handsome stranger I had seen in science class. Ironically, a few weeks later, he approached my friends and I on the beach. "Do you girls feel like playing volleyball?" he asked. He looked very familiar, but I couldn't place his face at the time. We spent the afternoon playing volleyball with him and his friends. He was friendly and silly. About a month went by before I saw him again. It was early in the summer and a festival of some sort was in town. I was in a rush to close up the restaurant so I could watch the fireworks planned for the evening. He walked up to the door and asked if we were still open. I said no and went back to whatever I was doing. But he kept talking to me. He was charming. He was chatting small talk about the weather, the night, the smell of the air. I listened as I completed my task, and when I turned to him, I recognized him as the guy from the beach. "Hey, you're the guy from the beach," I exclaimed. His face lit up and he seemed flattered that I remembered him. "Yeah, I remember you," he responded, confirming my recollection. After about a half hour more of shooting the breeze, he asked me for my phone number and shocked the hell out of me. Though I had a boyfriend, I gave him my number. "My name is Neil." I still remember the smile on his beautiful face when he... I don't know what he did. The moon was very large, shining over the water where the restaurant sat perched above. He lived near me during summers, just on the other side of the Damerscott River. The first time I went to his house, he picked me up in his boat at the public landing in the back parking lot, where, by the way, there's a sign now that says no public drinking, and I know I'm the reason why. We sat in his living room and he played his guitar. We talked about Connecticut, which was where he lived the rest of the year. We talked about a lot of other things too, but they've slipped my mind. But I do remember the guitar, the sun falling into the room through the camp's windows, and the kiss that he gave to me, shy at first, then with more confidence. It grasped me and held me in place, though I figured my boyfriend would not have approved of that occurrence. I left that afternoon with butterflies in my stomach. Neil was painfully attractive, incredibly sweet, intelligent, talented, and just all around wonderful. I just didn't know it then, but I didn't know it then that I was going to fall in love with him that summer, a love that would last through time, space, and lovers. That summer went by so quickly. Between work and Neil, I never saw my boyfriend. He worked and lived a long drive away and paid little attention to me. He seldom called or visited, and when he did, it was usually a short, uneventful stay. So Neil and I continued our romance, which as far as Neil was concerned, was the only one I had. He was so, deviant. He was so attractive. He had a six-pack stomach, long, muscular legs, and eyes that stared right into my thoughts, taking them back into his own mind like a keepsake. His teeth were perfect white and straight, lining his soft lips like little jewels. Neil and I had so many fun times together. We did funny things to see each other. I would sneak out late at night when my father had gone to sleep and flee into the darkness to find comfort with him. I exited my apartment one night to find a 10-speed propped up against the garage. A letter taped to the handlebars read, "May this bike bring you safely to me, and with Godspeed, love, Neil." The ride to Neil's house was a good 5 miles or so, a steady incline. I would cut through the back parking lot up the Bristol Road hill. It seemed like forever. That hill went up and up and up, on and on. Finally, I saw a sign that informed me of the presence of Neil's road. I would take the next right, a hidden dirt drive that ran deep into the woods, away from the main road. The truck was long and winding and pitch black, with lots of big rocks that I could not see, frequently upsetting the bike. There were strange noises, and the winds would blow with disturbing ferocity. Ferocity? The stars were bright, and their light entangled with that of the moon. Together they served as the only source of light I had. After what seemed like an eternity, I would come to the clearing where Neil's cottage sat, perched on the rocks of the Damerscott River. He would be sleeping in his tent, and I would wake him. We would talk and walk down the road together. With Neil, the curvy, scary old road lost its spooky ambiance. His presence calmed and soothed me. His hands were large and warm. His hair was soft and smelled clean. He told me jokes or stories about his job, and sometimes we wouldn't talk at all. We would retreat to the confidentiality of his tent, and all night we would play, our hands fumbling about each other's bodies. Clothes were shed on the ground of the tent, and we would go to work on the small cot that he had brought out to the tent. I was barely experienced. He would be so nice to me. I loved to be with Neil. I loved the way he breathed. I loved his face and his demeanor. I loved his back and his stomach. I loved his feet and his ears and his nose, and I loved his rosy cheeks. I liked him, all right, you guys? I liked him. Why I did I never wanted to give him up. Why I did, I still can't say. Probably because I was young and I didn't know any better. Maybe I feared being alone in the fall once he left to go back to school. Most likely it was because I didn't know I was in love and it just passed me by. He was 21 or 22 and I was only 16. We lied to our parents. I was 18 to his and he was 20 to mine to avoid any hassles. My boyfriend was also 20, so I assumed that if Neil were too, my dad wouldn't care. Maine. Not because he was 20, but because he knew I was involved with him behind my boyfriend's back. In the living room one night, Eric, a close family friend, sat down beside me. It had been a particularly stressful day in Loveland because Neil had stopped by and left only minutes before my boyfriend surprised me with an unplanned visit. I was rehashing the incident to Eric. He laughed and put his arm around me. In his thick New York accent, he said, "Kid, let me tell you something about playing triangles. Don't play triangles." I still remember that statement in surround sound, clear and crisp, as if it were yesterday. It lives in my memory banks like an old friend popping up to greet me quite often, unfortunately. I guess I never learned. At the time, I certainly didn't care. I had more important things on my mind, like Neil, and how he made me feel, and what it was like to be sitting beside him in his truck, moving towards Noblesboro, to the secret place in the woods where we would go to frequently park. The spot overlooked the river and had a path that even led down to the rocks, which perched on the... The place was a haven to me, a safe lot where we could go to kiss, touch, and talk and do whatever we wanted without me fearing discovery from a nosy local, the lady who worked with my boyfriend's mom at the flower shop, the man who worked with my boyfriend down on the docks, or the windbag who worked at the register at Maritime Farms who had a crush on him. I was good, too, at keeping it unknown. No one knew for a long time, even in the small town of Damerscott, where it is virtually impossible to keep a secret for more than 2 hours. Neil would wonder why he couldn't kiss me or hold my hand in public, but unfortunately Eric's words rang true. One night after work, Neil arrived to give me a ride home. He gave me a piggyback ride out to the parking lot, and we marched right by my boyfriend, who sat huddled in the dark in his pickup truck. Very down. In Neil's truck, I curled up next to him and kissed his lovely neck and caressed his soft hair, placing my hand tenderly on his shoulder in between kisses for the entirety of the ride. Unbeknownst to the two of us, my boyfriend was hot on our trail, and he followed us the whole way, making mental notes of the whole escapade to use against me later that night when the phone rang in my bedroom. He busted me in a lie within the first 2 minutes of the conversation, then again after that, when I tried to cover it up, and again when I tried to hide that one. I got bagged, and I knew I was screwed. I knew that I would have to make a decision, and I knew that I would have to tell Neil that I had a boyfriend. I also knew that I would choose Steve, my boyfriend, over Neil, though he didn't stack up to even a third of what Neil was. It was a lot of work to be 16 and in love with two men, something I hadn't considered and wasn't mentally or emotionally prepared to deal with. The day I broke the news to Neil, I rode my bike to his house. The summer was loosening its grip around the cozy main town, yet it was warm and dry. School would start back up again, and I knew that meant Neil would be going back to college soon. I walked into his living room where he sat on the couch curled up with his guitar. He sang a song by Yes, and I sang along. I sat next to him and we kissed. I was so enjoying the moment, I never wanted it to end, and especially not the way it was about to. I told him I had a boyfriend and the fact that we had been figured out. He was so patient and polite. He explained that it was not fair of me to put him in that position where he had gained an enemy without knowledge of having done anything wrong. As I told him that I couldn't see him anymore, I got up to leave. He traced my face with his green eyes. A sad smile played on the corner of his mouth. He wore an expression of defeat, loss, and disappointment. I could feel him thinking thoughts that I couldn't quite put my finger on and couldn't accurately read, but I somehow knew his state of mind and solemnly felt the same way. We came to a mental agreement, and I looked at him good and hard before I left. I walked out the door, leaving Neil behind only physically. I was just 19 years old and tired of the small coastal Maine I called home for most of my life. I developed an overgrowth of memories, experiences, adventures, and friends in that place that were stuck to me, defining me. So when I got the opportunity to move to California for the summer, nothing could hold me back, not even my boyfriend at the time. I'd packed everything into boxes and sent what I needed ahead of me. I put things I couldn't bear to part with into storage and sold almost everything else. I took 2 whole days before I left and set them aside for the mental preparation I knew that I would need in order to leave my small hometown behind. As I knew once I left, I would not be coming back. Damascata is the type of place where you can get trapped forever, and many people have. Many of my friends got pregnant at a young age or got tied into a family business, and Damascata is where they will always be. When I go home for holidays or visits, I see them caring for their toddlers, fingers rough from shucking oysters and picking crabs. I got into my car and drove all around town. I drove down to Pembroke Point, the oldest lighthouse in the U.S. I'd experienced so many things there: picnics, love affairs, fights, drunken stupors. I drove by the beach. I visited old friends. I collected goodbye wishes and addresses, good luck tokens and kisses. At the end of the night, I stopped into a pizza place known for their great Sicilian slices. I ran into some friends and announced that I'd be leaving. We talked and laughed, we reminisced, we exchanged promises of eternal friendship and phone calls. As I got up to walk out the door, I saw a man enter with a lady at his side. He was tall and slim with a smile that stopped me in my tracks. It was Neil. Our eyes met immediately. I rushed to hug him, and then slugged back when I noticed he and the lady were holding hands. My eyes ran all over his face and body, opening mental floodgates and overwhelming me with old feelings. I was so happy to see him. I wanted to hug him and tell him how much I missed him and asked him to go for a ride with me. But when he showed me the ring on his finger, I knew what I would do next. I shook his young future wife's hand, smiled, and congratulated her. I kissed him politely on the cheek and wished him the best of luck. I smiled so brightly as my heart broke all over again. Even today, I still miss Neil. If I saw him on the street, I would try to lure him home with me. But I'm sure that would not help to seize my memory from crawling back in a time to a summer when I was just beginning to learn about love. If I could go back, I would have let him go. I wouldn't have let him go. I would have praised him and would have proudly walked down the street holding his hand, accepting his kisses. I think about Neil all the time. I think about his beauty. I think about how silly he was and how funny we were together. I remember him playing his guitar in the sunny afternoon. I think about the big green truck he used to drive around like a Maserati. I still find myself cuddled in his arms, in his bedroom, in his tent. In my mind, I can see us rushing down the path to the rocks, laughing, the summer curling its fingers surrounding us. I'm still looking for Neil everywhere and everyone I meet. I look at their teeth, at their hands, at their hair. I look at their souls, but Neil is never there. I just want to say, I actually wrote this story a while ago, but I'm engaged now, and if my fiance heard this story, it would probably really crush him. So maybe the video should just not go online. But yes, I'm happily engaged to a guy who totally kicks Neil's ass. Woo!